Here's part 1, hook and intro, is almost equal to 250-300 words, written in a natural, simple, story-driven style, following your exact instructions. She thought it was just another bike repair. Just another day with grease on her hands and an engine waiting to roar again. But only minutes after handing the keys back, she was out of a job. Fired. No warning, no explanation, not even a thank you. Just silence, heavy and cold, as if her very presence was the problem. Why would fixing a customer's bike lead to something so cruel? Was it really about the motorcycle, or was it about her? And what no one expected was what happened next. Because one man, the very man whose bike she fixed, did something that would shake the whole town, leaving everyone speechless. Before we dive deeper into what happened that day, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or your country down in the comments. I love seeing how far stories like this can travel, because sometimes, the struggles of one person in a small corner of the world speak to people everywhere. And if this story feels close to your heart, make sure to hit subscribe. Why? Because the next story I tell could be yours, or someone who reminds you of yourself. This isn't just about a broken bike. It's about respect, about how unfair life can be even when you give it your all, and about the kind of courage that can't be hidden forever. So, let's start at the beginning, with Tasha, a young woman whose love for engines was stronger than anyone's doubt. Tasha wasn't like most people in her town. While others grew up chasing sports or hanging around at the mall, she found her joy in the sound of engines. The steady hum, the sharp clank of a wrench, the smell of oil and steel, these things made her feel alive. She grew up in a small Midwest town, a place where everyone knew each other and where old ideas seemed to stick longer than they should have. For a black girl who loved fixing cars more than anything else, that wasn't always easy. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and every extra dollar she saved went into supporting Tasha's dream. The very first socket set Tasha ever owned wasn't new, it came from a yard sale, but to her, it was priceless. She spent nights on the porch with flashlights, taking apart old engines, then putting them back together just to prove she could. She didn't go to parties, didn't care much about what her classmates thought. All she wanted was to be the best at something she loved. By the time she turned 22, Tasha had earned her place at Rusty's Garage, one of the busiest shops in town. She wore coveralls stained with oil and grease, tied her braids back under a cap, and worked circles around the men who doubted her. She wasn't just good, she was fast, sharp, and precise. That Tuesday morning seemed no different from any other. Tasha had her head under the hood of an old Ford, her hands steady, her mind focused on a stubborn bolt that just wouldn't turn. The garage was busy, the usual sounds filling the air, tools clinking, engines coughing, men laughing in the background. But then, everything shifted. The deep rumble of a motorcycle cut through the noise, so strong that it made the windows shake. It wasn't just any motorcycle. This sound carried weight, like a warning. Slowly, the chatter in the garage faded into silence. One by one, the mechanics lifted their heads, their faces tightening as they looked toward the open bay doors. And there he was, a man in a black leather vest, tall and broad, his expression locked in stone. On his back, stitched into the leather, was the patch everyone recognized. Hell's Angels. Most of the men in the shop stepped back without thinking, like the presence of that patch alone meant danger. But Tasha didn't move. She wiped her hands clean on a rag, pulled off her cap, and walked toward him. Her voice was calm when she asked, "What's the problem?" The biker's eyes studied her for a moment, not with anger but with something unreadable. Then he pointed at his bike. "It won't turn over. Electrical short, maybe." His words were few, clipped, like he didn't waste time explaining himself. Tasha crouched beside the bike, her eyes scanning the chrome, her fingers moving with the kind of confidence that only came from years of practice. She ran her hand along the wires, tested connections, and then gave a small nod. "Loose ignition coil. I can have you back on the road in an hour," she said. Her tone carried no bragging, no fear, just pure certainty. The biker gave a short nod and stepped back. Around them, the shop felt uneasy. Whispers started behind her back, some about the man, some about her. A black girl working on a Hells Angels bike was enough to make every set of eyes in the garage widen. But Tasha blocked them out. This was her world. Engines were her language, and she wasn't about to stumble now. For the next hour, she worked quickly, every move sharp and practiced. Sweat traced down her neck, but her focus never broke. The biker stood silently nearby, his arms crossed, watching. Not once did he question her, not once did he doubt her hands. That was something she noticed, he gave her a respect the men she worked with rarely did. Finally, she tightened the last bolt and hit the starter. The bike roared to life with a low growl that echoed through the shop. The sound was so deep it rattled the floor. The biker nodded once more, his lips pressed in the smallest sign of approval. Not a smile, not even a thank you, just acknowledgement. For a man like him, that was more than enough. "You're good to go," Tasha said simply, standing tall and wiping her hands. The job was done, and she had done it flawlessly. But she didn't know that in the next few minutes, her entire life would change. Tasha had barely finished wiping her hands when she heard her name cut through the shop. "Tasha. My office. Now." It was Rick, her manager. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of weight that made the other mechanics glance at each other, then look away. She walked toward the small office, confused but not worried. She had just fixed a job others wouldn't even touch. Maybe he wanted to talk about the biker, maybe even give her credit. But the second she stepped inside, she felt something was wrong. The air was heavy. Rick closed the door behind her, slow and deliberate, as if shutting her in. He didn't waste time. "I don't think this is working out anymore," he said flatly. Tasha blinked, waiting for more. "What do you mean?" she asked, almost laughing because it sounded like a bad joke. "I just did my job." "What's the problem?" Rick didn't flinch. He kept his arms crossed, his face cold. "That kind of customer, that kind of attention, it's not good for business." The words hit harder than if he'd shouted. He didn't say the real reason. He didn't have to. He didn't say black. He didn't say woman. He didn't say, "You don't belong." But the message was carved into every pause, every look in his eyes. Tasha's chest tightened. Years of proving herself, years of being doubted, brushed aside in a single sentence. She had been the one who arrived before sunrise, who worked faster than anyone else, who kept the shop running when others messed up. None of it mattered. Not here. Not to him. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. "You're firing me for fixing a bike?" Rick avoided her stare. "It's not personal," he muttered. But everything about it was personal, and they both knew it. When she walked out of that office, toolbox in hand, the garage was silent. No one spoke. No one stepped in. The same men who had watched her fix that bike so perfectly now pretended to be busy with their tools. The silence was worse than words. It was agreement, quiet approval of what had just happened. Tasha walked to her truck, her steps heavy. She sat in the driver's seat with her hands gripping the wheel, but she couldn't turn the key. She was shaking, not from fear but from something deeper, anger, heartbreak, disbelief. Memories rushed in like a flood, her mother saving for her first tools, the nights she spent studying manuals while her classmates posted prom pictures, the countless times she smiled through insults or brushed off doubts. She had fought so hard for this place, and it tossed her aside like she was nothing. For a moment, she let herself sit in the quiet, staring at her trembling hands. Fired for doing everything right. Fired for being exactly who she was. But then, her phone buzzed. A single message lit up the screen. 2 words. "Come outside." Tasha stared at her phone, reading the 2 words again. "Come outside." Her heart jumped. It was the biker. She didn't know what to expect, but something in her gut told her to go. Slowly, she pushed open her truck door and stepped out into the fading sunlight. He was there, standing tall in his leather vest, arms crossed like a wall of steel. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, 3 more motorcycles lined up in the parking lot, their riders waiting, engines idling low and steady. The sound was deep, steady, and unshakable, like thunder rolling across the ground. People walking past stopped to stare. The biker looked at Tasha, then turned his eyes toward the garage. "That your boss?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. Tasha hesitated. "Was," she said softly. He gave a single nod, then started walking toward the shop. The other bikers followed close behind. The sound of their boots against the pavement was enough to make heads turn from across the street. Rick stepped out of the garage, his arms folded, his face stiff. But even from a distance, Tasha could see the change in his expression. He wasn't as sure of himself now. The crowd was growing. Phones were up, recording. The bikers stopped a few feet away from him, their presence heavy and unignorable. "What's this?" Rick asked, trying to sound steady. His voice cracked just a little. The biker didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on Rick. "That girl," he said, nodding toward Tasha. "She fixed my bike better than anyone ever has." "And you fired her." "Big mistake." Rick's mouth opened, but no words came. Before he could even try to speak, the other bikers revved their engines all at once, the roar echoing so loud it shook the shop windows. People on the sidewalk gasped, some cheering, others lifting their phones higher. The noise wasn't just sound, it was a warning, a statement that couldn't be ignored. Rick took a step back, his face pale. He looked at Tasha, then at the crowd, then back at the biker standing in front of him. The silence that followed was louder than the engines. He had nothing to say. The biker leaned in just slightly, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You don't throw away someone like her. Not without the whole world seeing." The words cut through the air like a blade. For a moment, everything was still. Then the engines roared again, shaking the ground as the bikers turned their bikes around. One by one, they pulled out, leaving behind the echo of their power, the smell of gasoline, and a stunned silence. Only the first biker stayed a moment longer. He turned his head to Tasha, his voice calm but steady. "Keep fixing bikes. You're better than this place." Then he kicked his engine to life and rode off, leaving the whole street buzzing with shock. People who had stood by in silence before were now whispering, recording, sharing. The shop that had made Tasha feel small suddenly looked smaller than ever. Tasha stood there, the weight of what just happened sinking in. For the first time all day, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel powerless. Something had shifted, and deep down, she knew, this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. By the next morning, Tasha's phone was buzzing nonstop. At first, she didn't understand why. Then she saw it, a video of the confrontation outside the garage. Someone had filmed the entire thing, from the moment the biker stepped forward to the roar of engines that shook the street. The clip was already spreading everywhere. Comments poured in by the thousands. People were angry, not at her, but at what had been done to her. Strangers were calling her brave. Others were asking for her side of the story. Some simply wrote, "She deserved better." The garage's name was all over the internet too, but not in the way Rick had wanted. The shop's page filled with one-star reviews, angry messages, and people demanding answers. By trying to silence her, he had only exposed himself. For Tasha, it was overwhelming. She never asked for attention. She never wanted to be the center of anything. All she had done was her job. But now, the world was watching. And for the first time, she wasn't alone in her fight. Then came the messages that changed everything. People offered donations, saying they wanted to support her. Some offered job opportunities, telling her she had a place in their shops. But the one message that stuck with her came from a young girl who wrote, "I didn't think girls like us could do this. You showed me we can." Tasha sat with that message for a long time. Maybe this wasn't just about her anymore. Maybe it never was. With the small savings she had put aside, plus the donations that kept coming in, Tasha made a choice. She rented out a tiny space on the edge of town and bought the basics she needed: a lift, some tools, a sign. She painted the name herself, Tasha's Torque and Tune. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. At first, it was just her and the engines. But word spread quickly. People showed up not just because she was good, which she was, but because they believed in what she stood for. Customers drove in from towns she'd never even visited. Other women applied to work with her, women who had been turned away or laughed at somewhere else. Tasha didn't just give them jobs. She gave them the trust she had been denied. Her garage became more than a business. It became a place of belonging. A place where people who had always been told no finally heard yes. Every time Tasha handed over a fixed car or bike, she felt something shift inside her. The sting of what happened at Rusty's garage wasn't gone, but it was no longer the end of her story. It was the fuel that drove her forward. And as her shop grew, so did her voice. Reporters called. Community leaders wanted to meet her. People kept sharing her story online, not just as a mechanic, but as proof that no matter who you are or where you come from, talent and grit can't be silenced forever. Tasha never forgot that day she was fired for doing everything right. But now, when she thought of it, she no longer felt only pain. She felt power. Because being pushed out had forced her to build something greater, not just for herself, but for everyone who would come after her. Tasha's story didn't end in silence. It didn't end with her walking away in shame, or with her letting someone else decide her worth. It ended with engines roaring in her own garage, doors wide open for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. She had been pushed out for reasons no one wanted to say out loud, but instead of breaking, she built something stronger. What happened to her is a reminder that sometimes, being great at what you do still isn't enough when the world refuses to see you. And that's the hardest truth of all. But Tasha proved that when one door is slammed shut, you don't just stand outside waiting. You build your own door. And you leave it open for others who will come after you. The question is, how many more people like Tasha are out there right now, unseen, unappreciated, and pushed aside? And what would happen if we all stopped pretending not to notice? If this story stayed with you, hit that like button. It takes only a second, but it helps more than you think. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe and stay connected. Because the next story could be about someone you know, or even about you.